The rain fell without mercy on the corrugated metal roofs of Ironhaven's lower district. Dominic Vale pulled his coat tighter as water dripped from the rusted beams overhead, splashing into murky puddles that reflected the dim glow of shop lanterns. The bazaar sprawled beneath a network of elevated railways and suspended walkways, creating a maze of stalls and vendors that seemed to exist in perpetual twilight. He checked his wrist display again, calculating the remaining credits in his account. Boots for the girls. That was the mission. Nothing more, nothing less. The warehouse had finally paid him for the overtime shifts, and every credit mattered when you were raising 2 daughters alone. Cassie walked ahead with the confidence of someone who had learned too early to be cautious. At 13, she had her mother's sharp eyes and careful way of moving through crowds. Her dark hair hung in a practical braid, and she wore the patched jacket that had once belonged to her mother. She stopped at a stall displaying used footwear, already inspecting the merchandise before Dominic caught up. Nina held his hand with both of hers, jumping over puddles and humming a melody she had learned at school. At 9 years old, she still carried some of the lightness that grief had stolen from her sister. Her boots were falling apart, the soles separating from the leather with each step. She needed new ones most urgently. The market pressed in around them with noise and motion. Vendors called out prices in overlapping voices. The smell of fried dough mixed with machine oil and wet stone. Steam rose from cooking pots and mingled with the cold air, creating a fog that clung to everything. Dominic had worked as a field medic in the border territories before settling into civilian life. He knew how to read a crowd, how to spot trouble before it found him. This part of the bazaar made his instincts flare. The deeper stalls attracted desperate sellers and equally desperate buyers. It was where things that should not be sold changed hands in quiet transactions. He had planned to turn back before reaching the far end. Then Cassie stopped walking. Her voice came out flat and controlled. "Dad. Look at that." Dominic followed her gaze to a raised platform against the back wall. 3 women stood under a sagging metal awning, lit by a single flickering lantern. They were Viridian, their skin displaying the characteristic green tones that marked them as alien-born. Their complexions ranged from deep emerald to pale mint, with darker lines tracing along their shoulders and arms where restraints had once pressed too long. They wore thin market wraps that hung loose on their frames, barely covering their bodies. Short torn skirts left their legs exposed to the cold. Their feet were bare on the wet stone, reddened from standing in the chill. Long copper-red hair fell down their backs in tangled waves, damp and neglected. A man in a stained coat stood beside the platform, arms crossed, expression bored. He called out in a mechanical voice that suggested he had repeated these words many times. 3 units available. Healthy workers. Sterile certified. No breeding complications. Discount for complete set purchase. Nina's grip on Dominic's hand tightened. "What does sterile mean?" she whispered. Cassie answered before he could, her jaw set hard. "It means they cannot have children. So he thinks they are worthless." Dominic watched the 3 women. The oldest stood with her spine straight and chin lifted, though her hands trembled where they clutched the fabric at her shoulder. Her skin was the darkest green of the 3, forest-toned and marked with faint scars. Her eyes stared past the crowd with fierce determination, refusing to acknowledge the stares. The woman in the center held her arms wrapped around herself, not in defiance but in protection. Her jade-green skin showed goosebumps from the cold. A thick braid hung down her back, fraying at the end. She blinked rapidly, fighting against rising panic. Her breathing came quick and shallow. The youngest shifted her weight constantly, feet moving against the cold stone. Her mint-toned skin was lighter than the others, scattered with darker freckles across her cheeks and exposed thighs. Copper curls fell into her face. Her mouth pressed into a thin line, and her eyes held something dangerous. She looked ready to fight. Dominic felt anger settle in his chest. He had seen this before in different forms. People lined up like cargo. Assigned, sold, or discarded based on arbitrary value judgments. The setting changed, but the cruelty remained constant. The seller noticed his attention and raised his voice. "You there? Warehouse man with the girls. Good day for business. These three work without complaint. Sterile tested means no surprise expenses later. Clean investment." The words landed like stones. Cassie made a disgusted sound. "That is sick," she muttered. Nina moved closer to his side. "They are shaking, Dad." "Are they scared?" "Probably," he answered quietly. The woman in the center glanced at him with a quick sideways look, measuring and calculating. It was the automatic assessment of someone trained to read the moods of those who controlled their fate. Her gaze moved to Cassie and Nina, noting the girls, their worn clothes, the way they stood together. Something flickered in her expression. A thin thread of exhausted hope. The oldest woman's eyes met his for just a moment before looking away, as if refusing to risk any interest that might be misinterpreted. The youngest did not look at him at all. She stared over his shoulder, jaw locked. Cassie spoke again, voice low but intense. "We are not talking about everyone in the city. We are talking about them. Those three right there." Dominic felt pressure building behind his eyes. He was a man who lived by careful calculations. What he could afford, what he could not. What he could control, what he could not. Adding 3 more people to his household would strain everything. There was no extra space in the apartment. No extra beds or supplies. The smart choice was obvious. The seller tried again. "Make an offer. You get workers. They get shelter. Everyone benefits." "How long have they been here?" Dominic asked. "Long enough that feeding them costs more than they are worth," the seller replied. "Previous owner died. Heirs cleared the estate. Once the medical records arrived, nobody wanted them. People prefer fertile stock." The explanation was delivered without emotion, like discussing furniture. Dominic checked his mental budget. Rent, food, utilities, school costs, emergency reserve. The numbers were tight but not impossible. Nina's voice cracked slightly. "I do not like him, Dad." Neither did Dominic. He looked at the 3 women again. They were not children. They were adults who had been treated as property. The fear in their eyes mixed with something else. Stubbornness. A refusal to break completely despite everything. He felt responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical weight. "Price," he said. The seller's expression brightened. "For all 3? "Yes." The number the man quoted was shockingly low. It told Dominic exactly how little value the seller placed on their lives. The transaction took less than 2 minutes. Dominic pressed his wrist display against the payment pad. A soft tone confirmed the credit transfer. His emergency fund dropped by half. The seller turned to the women. "Off the platform. You belong to him now." The word belong scraped against Dominic's conscience, but he said nothing yet. One step at a time. The oldest woman moved first, stepping down with careful dignity despite her bare feet and inadequate clothing. Up close, her eyes were golden brown and fierce. She did not lower them when he met her gaze. The middle woman followed, clutching her wrap with both hands. Her breathing remained shallow and quick. The youngest jumped down, landing lightly. Her eyes swept over him once with cautious curiosity, then moved toward the exit. They stood together, shoulders almost touching, waiting for whatever came next. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time Dominic led his expanded group away from the platform. The 3 Viridian women walked close together, their bare feet making soft sounds against the wet stone. He noticed how they moved as a unit, instinctively protecting each other even now that the immediate danger had passed. Nina kept looking back at them, her face full of concern. Cassie walked beside her father, silent but alert. The market crowd parted around them with curious glances and occasional whispers. Dominic ignored it all, focused on getting everyone home quickly. "Wait here," he said, stopping at a textile stall near the market entrance. The vendor, an elderly woman with kind eyes, looked at the 3 Viridian women and understood immediately. "How much for 3 blankets?" Dominic asked. "Take them," the vendor said, pulling 3 thick woven blankets from her stock. "No charge. Get those girls somewhere warm." He started to protest, but she waved him off. "I have daughters too. Go." Dominic handed the blankets to the women. The oldest took hers with a slight nod, wrapping it around her shoulders with practiced efficiency. The middle woman clutched hers like a lifeline, pulling it tight around her body. The youngest hesitated before taking hers, as if suspecting a trick, then wrapped it around herself quickly. "Thank you," the middle woman whispered. Her voice was soft and uncertain, like someone unused to speaking freely. "You are welcome," Dominic replied. "We have a walk ahead. About 20 minutes. Can you manage?" The oldest woman spoke for the first time. Her voice was stronger than he expected, with a slight accent that made certain words sound musical. "We can manage. We have walked farther in worse conditions." The statement held no self-pity, just fact. Dominic nodded and started walking. The residential district sat 3 levels above the market, accessible by a series of metal staircases and narrow bridges. Dominic took the route slowly, aware that the women's bare feet were likely cut and bruised. Nina stayed close to the youngest Viridian woman, occasionally looking up at her with open fascination. "What is your name?" Nina asked suddenly. The young woman glanced down, surprised by the direct question. She hesitated, then answered. "Rian. I am Nina. That is my sister Cassie and my dad Dominic." Nina pointed to each person in turn. "Do your feet hurt? I have extra socks at home. They might be too small, but maybe they will help until we get you real shoes." Rian's expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Nina. That is kind." Dominic looked at the other 2 women. "And your names?" The oldest answered first. "Farah." The middle woman spoke quietly. "Solon." "Good to know you," Dominic said. "Our apartment is not large, but it is warm and dry. We will figure out the details once we get there." They climbed the stairs in silence. Halfway up, Solon stumbled, her legs shaking from cold and exhaustion. Cassie caught her elbow without hesitation, steadying her. Solon looked at the girl with wide eyes, as if kindness from strangers was unexpected. "Careful," Cassie said. "The steps are slippery." "Thank you," Solon whispered. The apartment building was old but maintained. Dominic led them down a corridor lit by flickering overhead lights. The walls were painted a faded yellow, marked with scuffs and scratches from years of use. He stopped at door 47 and pressed his hand to the lock panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss. "Home," he said simply, gesturing for them to enter. The apartment was small but clean. A main room served as living space and kitchen combined. 2 narrow bedrooms branched off to the right. A single bathroom sat at the end of a short hallway. The furniture was minimal but functional. A worn couch, a small table with 4 chairs, shelves lined with books and personal items. Pictures of a dark-haired woman hung on one wall, frozen in moments of laughter and warmth. The 3 Viridian women stood just inside the doorway, still wrapped in their blankets, unsure where to go or what to do. They looked around with careful attention, cataloging exits and potential dangers out of habit. Dominic gestured to the couch. "Sit down. Please. You are safe here." Farah moved first, sitting on the edge of the couch with perfect posture. Solon sat beside her, hands folded in her lap. Rian remained standing for a moment longer before finally sitting on Solon's other side. They stayed close together, shoulders touching. Nina disappeared into her room and returned with an armful of socks, handing pairs to each woman. Here. They are clean. Rian took them with a genuine smile, the first real expression of warmth Dominic had seen from her. You are very thoughtful, Nina. Dominic moved to the small kitchen area. I am going to make tea. Hot drinks first, then we talk about arrangements. He filled a kettle and set it on the heating unit, then pulled mugs from a cabinet. Cassie sat in one of the chairs at the table, watching the three women with analytical eyes. How long were you on that platform? She asked. Solon answered, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 days. Before that, we were in a holding facility for 3 weeks. And before that? Cassie pressed. Thera's jaw tightened. Before that, we served in a private household for 5 years. The owner died. His children did not want us. They learned we were sterile and decided we had no value. The kettle whistled. Dominic poured hot water over tea leaves, letting the steam rise and fill the room with a comforting herbal scent. He brought the mugs to the couch, handing one to each woman. Drink slowly, he said. It is hot. They accepted the tea with quiet gratitude. Solon wrapped both hands around her mug, absorbing the warmth. Rian sipped carefully, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation. Thera held hers without drinking immediately, as if processing the simple act of being offered something without expectation of payment. Dominic sat in the remaining chair. I need to be honest with you. This apartment has 2 bedrooms. The girls share one. I have the other. We do not have extra beds or much extra space. Tonight, we will make do with blankets and pillows on the floor in the main room. Tomorrow, I will see about getting proper sleeping arrangements. We do not need much, Thera said. We are used to difficult conditions. Maybe, Dominic replied. But you will not have difficult conditions here if I can help it. This is not a temporary shelter. I did not buy you to use you. I brought you here because leaving you on that platform felt wrong. You are people, not property. We will figure out how this works, but you are not servants here. The words hung in the air. Solon's eyes filled with tears that she blinked away quickly. Rian stared at him with open suspicion mixed with desperate hope. Thera's expression remained controlled, but her grip on the mug tightened. Why? Thera asked finally. Why would you do this? You do not know us. We cannot give you children. We have nothing to offer. Dominic met her gaze steadily. Because 5 years ago, my wife died. I know what it feels like when the world tells you that you are not enough. I know what it is like to be discarded by systems that do not care about your value as a person. I will not be part of that system. Not anymore. Cassie spoke up. Also, this house has been too quiet for too long. Maybe having more people here will help. Nina nodded enthusiastically. Yes. And you can teach me about Viridian culture. We learned about it in school, but I want to know real things, not just textbook stuff. Solon let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh. You are serious. You really mean this? I mean it, Dominic confirmed. I will not pretend this will be easy. Money is tight. Space is limited. People will talk. But if you are willing to try, so am I. Thera set down her mug carefully. When she looked up, her golden brown eyes held something fierce and fragile at once. We will try. We will work. We will earn our place here. You already have a place here, Dominic said quietly. Just by being people who deserve better than what you got. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of rain against the window. Something had shifted. The tension had not disappeared entirely, but it had eased. The three Viridian women sat a little less rigidly. Their shoulders relaxed slightly. Nina yawned, covering her mouth with her hand. Dominic checked the time display on his wrist. Late evening already. "All right," he said, standing. "Let me get bedding sorted. Cassie, Nina, help me pull out the spare blankets and pillows." The girls jumped up to help. Together, they created 3 makeshift beds on the floor, laying out thick blankets and soft pillows. It was not ideal, but it was warm and clean. The 3 women watched the process with expressions of disbelief, as if the simple act of being cared for was foreign. When everything was ready, Dominic stepped back. "Bathroom is down the hall. There are towels in the cabinet if you want to wash up. Take your time. We are not going anywhere." Solon stood first, still clutching her blanket. "Thank you. Truly. You have no idea what this means." "Maybe I do," Dominic replied. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start figuring out the next steps." The women took turns in the bathroom while Dominic got his daughters ready for bed. When he returned to the main room to turn off the lights, he found all 3 Viridian women already lying down, wrapped in blankets, eyes closed. But he could tell from their breathing that none of them were asleep yet. They were still processing, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. He turned off the lights and spoke into the darkness. "Good night. You are safe here." Thera's voice came back soft but clear. "Good night, Dominic. And thank you." He went to his own room, but sleep did not come easily. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the choice he had made. 3 lives now depended on decisions he would make. The weight of it pressed down on him, but beneath the weight was something else. A sense of purpose he had not felt in years. Maybe Cassie was right. Maybe the house had been too quiet for too long. In the main room, Thera lay awake, listening to the soft breathing of Solon and Rian beside her. For the first time in months, she felt something close to hope stirring in her chest. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, just for tonight, that maybe things could be different. Morning light filtered through the apartment windows, gray and soft. Dominic woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted upright, heart racing, and rushed to the main room. Solon stood at the stove, staring in distress at a pan of smoking eggs while Thera tried to open the window and Rian waved a towel at the smoke detector before it could activate. "What happened?" Dominic asked, moving quickly to turn off the heating unit. Solon's face flushed a deeper shade of green. "I wanted to make breakfast to thank you. I thought I remembered how, but the temperature control is different, and I miscalculated." Her voice shook with embarrassment. "I am sorry. I have ruined your food." Dominic took the pan and set it in the sink. "It is just eggs. No harm done." The thought was kind, even if the execution needs work. Cassie emerged from the bedroom, followed by Nina. Both girls assessed the situation quickly. Nina giggled. "Do not worry. Dad burns eggs all the time too." "Not all the time," Dominic protested. "Sometimes." Thera closed the window once the smoke had cleared. "We were trained in household tasks, but apparently not very well. Or perhaps it has been too long since we were allowed to practice." "Then we practice now," Dominic said. He pulled fresh eggs from the cooler and demonstrated the proper temperature setting, explaining as he worked. "Low heat, patience, and do not walk away from the pan. Cooking is about attention." The 3 women gathered around the stove, watching with intense focus. Solon asked questions about timing. Rian observed the way he moved the eggs in the pan. Thera memorized the temperature settings. When the eggs were done, Dominic divided them onto plates and they all sat together at the table. It was crowded with 7 people around a table meant for 4, but no one complained. Nina talked about school between bites. Cassie ate quietly, still watching the three women with cautious curiosity. Dominic noticed how Solon sat with perfect posture, how Thera cut her food into precise pieces, how Rian ate quickly as if expecting the plate to be taken away. Old habits from old training. After breakfast, Dominic addressed the practical matters. I need to go to work in an hour. I will be gone until evening. Cassie and Nina have school. That means you three will be here alone for most of the day. He paused, making sure they understood. You are not prisoners. You can leave if you want. The door will unlock from the inside. But this is your home now if you choose to stay. Thera met his eyes. Where would we go? This is the first place that has felt remotely safe. Good, Dominic said. Then make yourselves comfortable. There is food in the cooler. Entertainment system is there if you want to watch something. Books on the shelves. Just rest and recover. We will talk more tonight. Solon spoke hesitantly. Should we clean? Organize? We can be useful. You can do whatever makes you comfortable, Dominic replied. But you do not owe me labor. You live here. That is enough. The concept seemed difficult for them to grasp, but they nodded. Dominic left for work with his daughters, leaving the three Viridian women alone in the apartment. The day stretched ahead of them, empty and strange. They had spent years being told what to do every moment. Suddenly having freedom felt almost dangerous. Rian paced the apartment, examining everything. She looked at the pictures on the walls, studied the books on the shelves, tested the couch cushions. Solon sat quietly, hands folded, as if waiting for instructions that would not come. Thera stood at the window, looking out at the city below. This is real, right? Solon asked finally. He is not coming back with demands or expectations. I do not know, Thera admitted. But his eyes were honest. He looked at us like we were people, not things. His daughters did too, Rian added. Especially the little one. Nina. She has a good heart. They spent the day slowly exploring their new reality. They found clean clothes in a storage bin that Dominic must have left out for them. Simple tunics and pants, worn but functional. They took turns showering, luxuriating in hot water and privacy. They ate lunch carefully, taking only small portions, still unable to believe the food was truly theirs to take. In the afternoon, Solon found a datapad with instructional videos about cooking. She watched with intense concentration, taking mental notes. Rian discovered a collection of music files and played them softly, swaying to rhythms she had not heard in years. Thera read from one of the books, losing herself in stories of distant worlds and different lives. When Dominic returned that evening, he found the apartment spotless. The three women had cleaned everything, organized the kitchen, folded laundry. They stood together nervously as he entered, waiting for his reaction. He looked around slowly, then sighed. You did not have to do all this. We wanted to contribute, Thera said quickly. We wanted to show that we are not a burden. Dominic set down his work bag. Listen to me carefully. You are not here to be housekeepers. You are here to live. If you want to help with chores, fine. But do it because you live here, not because you think you have to earn your place. There is a difference. Solon's eyes glistened. No one has ever said anything like that to us before. Then people have been wrong, Dominic replied. He moved to the kitchen. Now, who wants to learn how to make proper dinner? Not burned eggs this time. Real food. They cooked together, Dominic teaching and the women learning. Cassie and Nina helped too, the kitchen crowded and chaotic but filled with laughter when Rian accidentally added too much salt and they had to start the sauce over. When dinner was finally ready, they ate together again, the conversation flowing more naturally than the night before. Over the following weeks, patterns emerged. Dominic went to work each day. The girls went to school. The three Viridian women created routines for themselves. They learned to cook properly. They explored the neighborhood in small groups, growing braver each day. Neighbors stared and whispered, but Thera met their gazes with fierce pride until most looked away. Solon discovered she had a talent for repairing things. She fixed the broken entertainment system, patched holes in clothes, mended a chair leg that had been wobbling for months. Her hands were steady and precise, her mind methodical. Dominic praised her work, and she glowed with quiet pride. Rian bonded with Nina, teaching her Viridian songs and stories. The youngest woman's defenses slowly crumbled under Nina's relentless kindness. She laughed more. She relaxed. The hard edges softened. Thera spent time with Cassie, the two of them sharing a similar protective nature. They talked about loss and responsibility. Cassie showed Thera pictures of her mother, sharing memories. Thera listened with empathy, understanding grief intimately. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Dominic found Thera standing at the window again, looking out at the city lights. He approached quietly. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. "Too much thinking," she replied without turning. He stood beside her. "Want to share?" She was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I keep waiting for this to end. For you to change your mind. For reality to come back and remind us we do not deserve this." "You deserve this and more," Dominic said firmly. Thera finally looked at him. Her golden brown eyes searched his face. "Why do you care so much? You could have walked away. You should have walked away." "Maybe," he admitted. "But I am tired of walking away from things that matter. My wife used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. She was right. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was." Dominic smiled sadly. "She would have liked you. All three of you. She always said our home had room for whoever needed it." Thera's expression softened. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition. A connection. Dominic felt it settle in his chest, warm and unexpected. He glanced at Thera and found her looking back at him with an expression that mirrored his own feelings. Surprise. Uncertainty. Hope. "Good night, Thera," he said quietly. "Good night, Dominic," she replied, and this time her smile reached her eyes. In the main room, Solon and Rian lay in their beds, no longer on the floor but on proper mattresses Dominic had purchased. They listened to the quiet conversation by the window and exchanged knowing looks. "Did you hear that?" Rian whispered. "I heard it," Solon confirmed. "Good. They both need someone." Solon smiled in the darkness. "Yes. They do." The apartment settled into sleep. 7 people under one roof. 3 species. Multiple stories of loss and survival. But together, they had created something new. Not perfect. Not easy. But real and warm and full of possibility. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady. But inside, everyone slept peacefully, wrapped in the knowledge that they were home.